Well, I was actually, I was right across in Hoboken at the edge of the pier, I guess. It was like watching a movie. It was so disturbing that you actually didn't really think it was happening. I thought it was basically going to be the end of the world. I was surrounded by a lot of people that had friends and family in that building. I didn't. So I felt like I almost didn't have a right to be there with them. And they were in a lot of pain. So it was difficult to watch. It made me decide that I was going to give my life some kind of purpose and hopefully give other people's lives some purpose or help them find their own purpose. And that was the moment. I was just tired of, really just being like another person that got on the train in the morning and went to work. I think I had a tape recorder, and I was really into movie soundtracks and certain songs that I hear on the radio. And I'd figure out a way. I didn't realize this till later. What I was doing is I was laying over parts over songs that already existed with a tape recorder, and that's what I think I had a boombox and a tape recorder, and I'd play it through the boombox, pick it up on the tape recorder, and lay over different vocal melodies. And I didn't even realize I was doing that. So, and then my grandmother had encouraged me to learn how to sing, so it was my grandmother mainly. If there's not something special there, it's not worth it. We had seen a lot of bands play live, and we had always wondered to ourselves, like, well, what are they missing? Why is this missing something? What's not here, And it was the fact that there was nothing special about a lot of these bands we'd go and see. And we just felt something right away because we're all really tuned into each other. That, chemistry is what makes us capable of great things that normally we wouldn't be capable of. We're not trained musicians. And yet we can write these songs that are multi-layered and influenced by maybe classical music we had heard when we were kids. And we can do all this stuff and make all these really bizarre arrangements, but it's because we really believe in ourselves and there's that chemistry. I think it happened at our third gig. We played at the Loop Lounge. It was an off night. It was like a Wednesday. And they didn't have anybody to play. I think the band that they had paid to play canceled, and they asked us the night before. They said, could you guys cover and come in and play? And it was our first time. We'd only played 3 shows at this point, but it was the first time not playing in front of kids. We had played at VFW halls and basements at this point. It was our first time playing in an actual club with people our age. And it was awesome. Then after the show, Alex asked if we wanted to put a record out. I think we only had about 6 songs. We needed at least 6 more, and we didn't know we were going to find them yet, but we just kind of kept... a song at this point started to come every week because we had devised this kind of... It wasn't even a formula, but we had developed this sound, and it was new that you could play around in it in different types of moods. I would describe it as definitely eclectic. I think its eclectic nature and its experimental nature is what makes us the band we are today. I think it's because of that record and certain songs on it, whether they succeed or fail, it's the main reason we can make songs that push the bar these days. We kind of set it into our DNA where it's actually, we can surprise people, and that's not a surprise to people. We can make songs that all sound different, and it's not a surprise. So that's cool about that record. That's the way I see it. It's flawed for sure. We made it in 8 days in a basement. It got us a lot of attention instantly, and the record kind of passed around like a word-of-mouth thing through the internet. There's less of a concept there than there should have been because of the death of me and Mikey's grandmother. The story was written years before the record, and it was really supposed to take place after the last song of the first album, which is, it's a very Bonnie and Clyde type thing. It's very, it's romanticizing these two people that are basically on the run and, killing people to stay alive, and, they kind of go down in hail of bullets, and he goes to hell, and she's not dead, and he makes a deal with the devil, and he comes back, and he has to kill 1,000 evil men to find his way to her. And so that was the story, and then, which is about loss anyway, and then we had a real loss. So then it became it was a record caught between reality and fiction at that point. There's a lot about my grandmother on that record that's really probably supposed to be about some other woman. I'd say that was probably the hardest point in this band's career, you know, which is good, because usually it's the follow-up record that's the hardest point in the band's career, and the pressures that come and the record that tanks usually after the follow-up, or the record that sounds the same, so we avoided all that stuff, thankfully. So that was the hardest point. It was a band that really had very large ambitions, but didn't care if they were fulfilling those ambitions in a basement or a club or an arena or anything, so really weren't prepared for those arenas. And then we saw ourselves thrust onto the stages of these arenas and on TV everywhere, and I think it made things very difficult for us. We weren't really ready for it. And, you know, we hadn't expected that kind of response. We usually like to talk about it. We actually won't, because it's just something that, you know, there's a lot of parties involved, and there's so many different sides to every story, and it was just a simple decision that had to be made. So we're just extremely thrilled to have Bob in the band, because something clicked after that, and that also made things easier. Standing in the middle of a crowd every night and making somebody else's drums sound good kind of got to me a lot, and I had hit the point where, like, I didn't give up on playing drums, but I didn't think it was going to be a possibility to make, you know, like, to be able to do that every day and be able to survive. And you know, it kind of made me more and more kind of depressed and angry, because that's what I wanted to do and I never could do it. And then it just happened. And, like, I got, you know, we were friends and we would talk all the time, and before it happened, it was, like I said, it was kind of like a joke about it, and finally when it happened, it wasn't even, you know, a question, and the band still wasn't, you know, doing a ton of touring. They were touring a lot, but it was all, like, little clubs, and it was kind of very unsure point. Like, the band could have completely tanked, or the band could have taken off, and for me, I didn't care either way, because it was kind of like it would take off for me anyway. So I wanted to play in this band so bad, and whether it was in front of 2 people or 2,000 people or whatever, I didn't care. And there were a lot of people that were kind of thought I was crazy, because I was doing really well and I was making money. And then, so yeah, I made the decision, and I got picked up 2 days later in the rusty van. And I hopped in and went straight to Jersey, and we practiced together for a day. He was more confident than us, for sure. And it's not that we weren't confident in him, we weren't confident in ourselves at that point, because well, it was, nobody really knew. It was a mess, but he definitely gave the impression that he was super confident, so that helped, actually. They never even heard me touch a drum before, ever. We just knew. We were just like, you just kind of know. Like, we hadn't heard him touch a drum, but, you know, that's what I talk about chemistry. It didn't matter. If he had showed up and he had needed a little polish or something, we still would have kept him. Musically, it wasn't perfect, because, you know, bands need time to learn each other and learn their different styles and learn what each other does and to play off each other. And it wasn't perfect, but it was right. He came in this band when this band had a very uncertain future. I was a drug addict who just got clean, and everybody didn't think I was going to stay clean. My close friends did, but nobody knew. They just thought it was just like another thing. So you had this, you know, drug addict singer who's an alcoholic, and they fire the drummer, and, you know, it's just so much. And no, we hadn't sold many records. We hadn't made a video yet. His first appearance with us is in our first video ever, our first major label video. So, you know, there's just stuff like that. And people don't really know, he quit a job where he was making a ton of money and took a risk on something that could have just, like, totally blown his career. All the songs were about life, because the last 2 years, 3 years of our lives were spent on this kind of adventure where we learned that, you know, life is actually kind of beautiful. The world is actually, it can be an ugly place, but it's also a beautiful place. There's a struggle to live more than a struggle to stay alive and not die. It's more about, like, the desire to live is what we realized people didn't have. Like, they didn't have a desire to be themselves and express themselves and be fearless. And And those were subjects that, so we dealt more with mortality. Revenge is about immortality. Black Parade's about mortality. We had written Dead, and we knew that's how we kind of wanted to start the record. Really kind of wrote it in order. And then we knew we wanted an intro. We wanted a piece right before Dead to kind of take you by the hand into this world. That's what we really wanted to do with this record, is really take people by the hand and bring them on an adventure with us, and a journey and an introspective kind of thing. And so we wrote this intro to go in front of Dead. And once that happened, we had the beginning of our record, and then we started to think about our end, you know. And we had already had all these crazy songs. It was about where to put them, you know, and how to get them to make sense. But the lyrics were all already there too. The story came out of those lyrics. It was all stuff about life and death. I mean, it's so personal to us. It's like our little boy. It's our baby, you know. So if people didn't like our little boy, then we'd be bummed on that. But we weren't worried about it being a huge failure or anything. Like, if anything, it was going to be a spectacular failure. We had expected it to get, if you know, either 5s or 1s and nothing in between. Like, you either got it or you didn't. So yeah, we designed it to be something spectacular, success or failure. I think that it goes hand in hand with our sense of theater and ambition. It was kind of like, well, we do this really good. We do this better than anybody that's doing it right now. It was almost like, you know, I hate when bands shy away from what they're great at. And we were great at ambition, we were great at theatrics, and we were great at playing live and putting on a show. We thought of ourselves as showmen. And to take it, you know, so we went full bore with that, you know, instead of shying away and making that record that, yeah, it's like really like aggressive, and they're wearing just like t-shirts now, and, you know, we didn't want to fake that. So I think that's what the decision was. It went hand in hand with making a grand record, was to take an alter ego, to wear something that, if in any way duplicated, simply looked like an imitation. Whereas before, like, anybody could then just throw on a suit or red tie and black, and it was just starting to happen. It was like really nauseating to just see how much it turned into a fashion show. So we decided to wear something as this persona that would potentially turn people off. We need a woman to sing this line. Let's get Liza Minnelli. She has a lot of strength, a lot of history, a lot of sorrow. She's a survivor, Liza Minnelli. And she comes from a lineage of theater and film that is phenomenal. I mean, she was, you know, born from legends. So we just made a call. She got into it, she did it for free. She was phenomenal. We're not actually gonna go bigger. Maybe the themes then are bigger. Maybe the words are more direct, even more than Black Parade. Maybe the songs are simpler. Maybe we start recording live. Maybe there's a lot of things we've never explored.
I think make something else that pushes, like we did with this, in a different way.
Yeah.
And not ever fall into a routine, and keep taking those risks that will push, you know, us and people that are with us on us, or with us on this.
Yeah.
And just the whole music world, and just push it as much as we can, and try to make something new and something special.
We used to share a rehearsal room with an all-girl band, where they were all the rage then. There was that Riot Girl thing going on. I mean, it's appalling, girls in bands. And they had a gig up in Glasgow, and they asked us to go and play with them. So we did, and Alan McGee, one of the girls who was in the all-girl band, was one of his ex-girlfriends. I think he went along to say hello, and there we were. And he walked in, and actually, the legend has it, he shouted "ka-ching" at the top of his voice when he heard "Live Forever." I used to go and see them, and then I was at Stone Roses gig, and there was a guy stood beside me on the balcony, and he had a Walkman, and he was taping the gig, and I asked him if I give him my address, would he send me a copy of the tape? And then we kind of got chatting and realised that he was in the Inspiral Carpets, and kind of got friendly with him from there, and then they kicked their lead singer out and asked me to audition for their lead singer's job, and I didn't get it because I was too cool, and I ended up setting the guitars up and the drums and that. I was in Munich with the Spiral Carpets, and I phoned my mum, and she said that Liam had joined the band, and I said, doing what? And she said, singing, and I laughed. I still am. It was the funniest thing I'd ever heard. And so when I got back off one of the tours, I don't know, they asked me to be their manager, which I declined, and then they begged me, all of them, all 4 of them got down on their knees and begged me to join their band and write songs, and I said, no, go on then. The whole thing about Oasis has taken me by surprise. You know, I knew we were a pretty good band, but if somebody would have said to me, you know, however many years ago it is, we'd have done what we've done and still be around to tell the tale. You know, I would kind of accepted it, but it's not something that you can. It still amazes me. Do you know what I mean? I think we've ascended to a place now where kind of you two are. You know, when people say, if someone was to say to you, what kind of music do you two make? It's kind of unanswerable. They don't make any kind of music. They make U2 music. And I think we've got to a place now where you can't pigeonhole Oasis, because for every term that you give it, like, well, it's rock and roll, and you think, oh, well, is Songbird rock and roll? And you say, oh, well, they write these big ballads, and you think, well, is the meaning of soul a ballad? As some might say, but I don't think so. So we've managed to carve out our own place in music, which is that we make Oasis music. It doesn't get any better than that, I don't think. The one thing we never do is sit down and put our album on a couch and psychoanalyse it, because it'll take the magic out of it. It's just great because it is, and thank the Lord that it is, because the next one might be shit. And we want, and you know, the next time we go to make a record and we put it out and people say it's shit, we won't know why it's shit. And I don't know why this one's great, but it is. I'll be quite frank, the band have never had it. You know, I was the first person to realise how good it was. You know, I'm still not sure Liam ever does, do you know what I mean? Liam lives kind of in his own little bubble, but songwriting, as he'll tell you, it's kind of like a sport. The more you practice at it, the better that you get. You know, if you don't write a song for about a year or something, it's very, very difficult to pick that up. You know, if you're constantly writing, you know, you'll find that you'll write more often than not more good stuff than bad stuff. So after about a year or two, I was practiced at writing songs, and they just started to get better. We were talking about this the other night, because it's got its staunch supporters within our camp. And I think the official line now is that if you could go back and listen to it on the day that it came out, it would still sound great, but it just didn't stand the test of time. And it's all right people saying, oh, but you know, oh, the songs are great and all that, but at the end, we don't play them songs live since that tour, never have done. And I don't hear anybody shouting in the crowd for all around the world, you know. So it wasn't a disaster, you know. It was just a kind of it was a mad time, you know. And the clue to that title is in the album, you know. It was all about then. That was the one where I felt the pressure more than anything, because I had to sit down for the first time in. When did that come out? 98? No, 99. I sit down for the first time in 5 years with no songs and create something. And I got a bit bogged down in trying to reinvent something that didn't need reinventing. But all the lyrics to that album are amazing. And I think that there's some real proper pieces of music on that, like Fucking in the Bushes and Gas Panic and Go Let It Out.
Roll It Over?
Yeah, there's some Where Did It All Go Wrong and Little James. But it was kind of, you know, we were all coming out of the party, and it was like recording an album with a serious hangover. Musically, Morning Glory, groundbreaking, I don't know, but it set that. I don't like to use this word because it's an American, no offense to you, but it raised the bar. It made everybody else better. It made Radiohead better. It made U2 better. It made The Verve better. It inspired the likes of Coldplay. You know, all of a sudden, You know, it wasn't acceptable not to sell millions of records, you know what I mean? We kind of blew the door open, really. And, well, I don't know about groundbreaking, maybe in terms of record sales. I've never understood the pretensions of rock stars that when they claim to be in the studio, oh, we knew we were making an important record. Because that, how can you predict that all those people are going to go and buy it? You can't. I mean, if it was that easy, I'd live in a house like this. But you can't listen to someone and say that's really important and it's going to be massive, because that's crazy talk. We knew, even from the outset, there was people within our little circle, whatever you call it, who were saying, it were kind of making noises that it wasn't as good as the first one. Even then, you know, but we just knew it was something different. You know, Champagne Supernova and Don't Look Back in Anger and Some Might Say, Morning Glory, they're all great songs, you know, we still play them to this day, which is probably the greatest compliment I can play them. I kind of go on stage most nights and I'll be halfway through Don't Look Back in Anger and think, what the fuck does it mean? I mean, really, what does it, you know, who is she and where's she going? And why should she not, do you know what I mean? It freaks me out. Is it possible to walk slowly down a hall faster than a cannonball?
I'd been in a couple of bands and got tired of it all. And I got this call, and if there was one band that I would have, you know, made a big life-changing decision for, it would definitely be Oasis, you know, hardly anyone else. Well, no one else. It flew over, played with them for a few days, and it seemed to work, and then I was asked to join. Gen was already in. He'd been, like, cherry-picked, hadn't he?
Mm. Well, he was the first person we asked because he wasn't doing anything, and we knew him. And his band, Heavy Stereo, was quite similar to ours. It was a very easy decision for all of us to make, I think. People always ask this about me, about sharing the songwriting. Like I'm some crazy old fucking Scrooge who lives in a tower, you know, and it's all mine, it's all mine. This is a band where it's about time these fuckers got their finger out. It's not about me sharing the songwriting, it's everybody else contributing. So it's not me giving anything away, it's them joining in. You know, I've always wanted to be part of a band in its truest, in the true meaning of the word. I used to have to write 30 songs for an album, right, and pick the best 16 for all the B-sides. I wrote 30 songs last year, we've used 5. I don't have to work until 2012 for the Olympics start. I'm serious. Get on that. Bet you'd love to be in that position, wouldn't you? I'm not doing not a stroke. I can unequivocally tell you that the word panic never comes into my vocabulary at all.
It was more like...
It was 3 years of leisure.
It was more like, this is not really working, is it? No.
Well,
should we take a month off and then talk about it in a month? And then...
Seriously. But we started off with a bunch of songs that we thought were great. It quickly dawned on us that while we were doing them, they weren't that great.
Yeah.
Now, my whole thing is, it's not working, you know, and there's no point in trying to throw any more shit against the wall there, nothing's sticking. I'm going on holiday. I invite you all to do the same. So it'd be like a month pass and then we'd reconvene. We were written off after signing the Shoulder Giants, written off as a nostalgia act that would travel the world playing stadiums with absolutely nothing new to offer anybody. We had to make a record, not for anybody else other than our fans, you know, because we'd lost them. Not live, we could still sell out Wembley Stadium, but we had to make a record that inspired the people that got into us in the first place. And we did. And we also had to, it was the first record we'd made together, and we also had to learn, it wasn't scary, I wasn't going into the studio scared, but it's like, it's a different thing being on stage and going, these are the songs we're going to play and they're the parts. I'll see you in the dressing room for a drink, you know. We're all professional musicians and we can do that. Being in the studio, trying to create something from scratch, you don't know how that's going to work, you know, because some musicians are different animals in the studio than they are on stage. You know, there's a lot of bluff, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way, you're kind of performing on stage. When you're in the studio, you kind of got to look each other in the eye and say, I'm not having that, that's shit, oh, that's great, you know. So that was, I used the word difficult, but it wasn't like a struggle, but it was kind of, fucking hell, is this going to work? Are we going to be able to make a record together? And it became obvious in about 20 minutes that it was going to be great. You know, we'd be speaking to Al and he'd be saying everything's all right, but then we'd be talking to Marcus, our manager, and he'd be saying it's not all right, you know. And then, unbeknown to us, Bonehead and Gwigsy were plotting to leave. And we were all kind of going our separate ways, really. I suppose to make you understand fully, you would have to understand the mindset. And nobody gave a fuck. Not in an half-arsed kind of way, but you know, when you're on the way up like that, right, it's the most vital thing in your life. But you know, there comes a point where you just can't be asked, because maybe you've had a bit too much success. But it, you know, and it's not. I don't think. Like I say, there's about 6 or 7 great pieces of music on that. That kind of speaks for itself, and I stand by every single word of those lyrics. They're fantastic. You only get paid a year after you start, you see. So about a year after Morning Glory coming out is when the money started to come in. And that's when the fun started. Because then you got to try and get rid of it before the taxman gets it off you. And they were kind of, that's when, in my opinion, that's when everybody gloriously, and I use that word in capital letters, gloriously lost the plot completely. You know, it just get me a limo now kind of thing. After Nebworth, we should have gone away and let the myth of the band build up for a few years. Because we tried to combine making another record and going out on tour with having the best times of our lives, and you can only do one or the other. But we tried to do it all at the same time. And inevitably what suffers is the music, I think, because you tend to devote less time to it and more time to, you know, shall I buy that chandelier? Could I sleep in that chandelier? I don't know, if I get a step ladder big enough, I could kip in there. That kind of thing. But that's great. You know, but the music suffered.
My parents they started all of us in piano when we were about 6, and they were encouraging all the way through. In fact, I got my degree at university in classical piano and classical voice. But it wasn't until I came home after teaching school for a couple of years where I said I was going to move to California that they were like, really? You really are going to do this music thing? But they were always very supportive about it, and still are. They're amazingly proud. I figured that because I was living in St. Louis and wasn't near either city where music was happening, that my best shot was to go to where the industry was. And for me, the best shot, or the industry existed in Los Angeles at that time, and that seemed like the best thing to do. Before I moved to Los Angeles, I taught school for a couple of years, but I was always in bands and I was writing music. And my second year of teaching, I got the opportunity to work in a studio in St. Louis and started doing jingles, which are commercial songs. And I had some success with that and felt like, well, I have a tape now and I have something to work from, so I'll just go to LA. I'd never even been to Los Angeles. And I kind of flipped a coin. It's like Los Angeles or New York, and New York seemed so much more daunting. And so, yeah, to leave home, and especially being from a small town, it was daunting and exciting. I first got out there, I lived with some friends at the beach, and for 2 months I just scoured through directories about where all the recording studios were, thinking that if I just take my tape to studios, that maybe somebody will hire me, which was very naive. But ultimately, that's kind of what did happen. I wound up going to all the wrong places, and people kind of led me to the right places. And then after a couple of months of being there, I moved closer to town and got a job as a waitress in a jazz club. And I got my tape out to some musicians and just started to get work. And then about 6 months in, I got an audition with Michael Jackson for the Bad Tour and went on the road with him for nearly 2 years as a backup singer. The entire experience of working with Michael and being on that tour everything was new for me. I'd never traveled extensively. I think I'd been to Mexico and that was it. And I didn't even own a passport. And literally after landing that gig, a month later we were playing Yokohama Stadium for 65,000 people with arguably the the most popular pop figure in the world, and I learned a lot. It was a crash course in music industry and how everything works, and also I got an immense amount of experience that I wouldn't have gotten any other way. And I really got to watch, I think, the consummate professional doing an art form that he really created every single night with perfection. Well, after being turned down by every single record label in Los Angeles, I met Hugh Padgham at a party for Sting, and wound up talking with him for a long time about what I was doing, and he asked me if I had a tape, and of course I did. And after a couple of days, he called me and said, I listened to your tape and I really love it, and I would like to try to do something with it, so I'm going to take it to A&M Records, which is where I have my relationship. And that's how I got my record deal. The album was the experience of making the album was just an incredible learning experience. And I think that the problem with it was the marriage of Hugh and I was not completely in sync as far as the direction. I'd made my demo on much like what Pro Tools is now, that version of it back 20 years ago, and it was very slick, but it was the only way I could record because I didn't have any money, so I made it with a friend and a computer. And I think sometimes you can get very committed to the demo and not be able to get outside of that vision. And so when the album was completed, I felt like it was so slick and almost generic sounding that if it went out, I would never be, I wouldn't stick out, I wouldn't be remembered, and I felt like it would be a bit of a really short career. For a moment there, I started hearing from people in town that I was losing my record deal, and kind of my own volition, I wound up seeking out Bill Bottrell through a friend of mine, just to get together and see what we might do if we got into the studio. And I wound up going back to A&M and saying, with 4 songs, one of which was Leaving Las Vegas, and another one was Strong Enough to Be My Man. And I gave those to them and said, this is what I really want to do. And they allowed me to go in and continue on with that process. The Tuesday Night Music Club record was kind of an experiment to begin with. I met with Bill Bottrell through a friend of mine, Kevin Gilbert, and part of our experiment really to see if we even gelled was just to get a bunch of people together and be in a studio. And I think I met him on a Monday, and that Tuesday night he called me and had gotten some friends together, and it was the first jam session, and they called and said, do you want to come out? I was the only woman, and it was a very heady experience because you had a bunch of very, although underground, very established musicians in the LA scene get together. And so for about 4 weeks in a row, we got together and wrote songs and partied and got stuff on tape. And then Bill and I really, I guess, came to the conclusion that we want to make a record together. We just don't know how exactly we're going to go about doing it. And it didn't continue on in that vein of just getting together and jamming. He and I got down to the business of writing and recording. But that was the original inspiration for the record, which was how the name came about. Well, part of our, I think part of the experience of being out in Pasadena and running around with this crew of guys was getting together and hanging out. Like we went to every haunt in LA, and we'd stay out all night and talk about conspiracy theories and very intellectual. We were kind of literati, if you will. And one night we got together after having had I can't even count how many margaritas, and wound up going to a bookstore and bought a little tiny thin book of poetry, as well as a lot of other obscure books, and went back to the studio and started playing music. And Bill handed me this little tiny poetry book, and I started singing the lyrics from the first poem in the book, which was called Fun, by this guy named Win Cooper, who was come to find out later on, a professor at some school, maybe in Vermont, a liberal arts school. Anyway, so I went on later on to write 4 or 5 more lyrics. I mean, like different lyrics, different subjects and everything, trying to match the original spirit of that poem, and just never could get the spirit back. And so I wound up calling Wynn and saying, I've used this poem. How do you feel about it? And that ultimately went on to become a #1 song. I by the time I got in to make that record, and we had gone through the whole Grammys surge and been really out on the road for nearly a little over 2 years on that record. I was exhausted and really tired of playing the same music every night for 2 years, and ready to make a new record, and had a lot of naysayers in the press. I think creating this mythology that I'd had nothing to do with my record, and there was a lot of controversy around the characters on the record, and I was really itching to go in and just make an artistic statement that felt like belonged solely to me and spoke to who I was, which is why I named the record Sheryl Crow. The fact that record became successful with, I think, 4 or 5 different songs that were really all about my life experience, it did feel like, okay, now I'm introducing myself, and from here is what matters, not from the first record, but really from this moment forward is where I get to actually create my artistic statement in the world. The Wildflower record had no obvious singles on it, and when I talked to Jimmy Iovine, who's the head of Interscope Records, I said, look, this is the record I want to make. I want to make a very artistic record that is based on my relationship with the listener, and I don't want to be concerned about having something that's going to sell. And he was very amenable to that and said, look, you've been around long enough that you have earned the right to just make an artistic statement. Sadly for me, because I really love that record and I love the process of making that record, sadly I got diagnosed with cancer right at the time I was going to be going out and promoting it. So the record didn't do well commercially, but I still feel like in the long run that that record will have a chance at standing up against time. For me, there was a lot of liberation in making the Wildflower record because I'd already hit 40, and my industry was becoming a lot more youth-oriented, and still is, but a lot of what was going on then were based around women who were like 19 or 20 and very image-oriented, and I really wanted to sort of I wanted to seize the opportunity to do something really mature. I think anyone who's ever been diagnosed with a life-threatening illness will attest to the fact that your life completely screeches to a halt, and it's from that moment on that you really define or refine who it is in your life and how you want your life to look and feel and how you're going to approach things. And there was a very big lesson for me in the cancer experience in that I had always put everybody and everything before me, and I'd always cared far too much about how I was perceived and how what my standing was with people, always wanting to be right with people, and finding it very difficult to ever say no or ever turn people down. And I really had to learn that lesson of listening to my own voice and listening to my body and learning to say no and to put my desires and my needs first. And it also, I think, became the impetus for my adopting Wyatt and of really saying, okay, what do I want for my life? What do I want personally in my life? What's missing? And so in so many ways, it was a blessing. I have a great relationship with Bill, and I've always had a great creative relationship with him. And we had about a 13 or 14-year hiatus in there between the first record and now, where we went off in our own lives, our own detours, and learned a lot about ourselves. And when we came back together to make this album, it was much like a homecoming, and very effortless and very emotional and very inspired, and we just had a great time. The reason for calling the album Detours was that for all of us who think that we control our lives, or all of us who think that we work hard and we make things happen, that there's a lot of unknown out there. There's a lot of fragility to the human experience, and you can be completely fit and be a good person and get diagnosed with cancer, and it happens, and there's so many unknown variables. But I think where we learn the most about ourselves is when our life does take us on a detour, where we get off of what that known course is, and it's on the way back that we really meet ourselves, and that we have the opportunity to refine or define who we are, and it helps us to remember who we are, who we meant to be. And my cancer experience and all the things that were going on in my personal life at that moment really did do that for me. I would love to think that songs could, change the human experience or give some sort of voice to what the collective is experiencing, much like what was happening in the 60s. I don't know that is happening or can happen at this moment because of the incredible amount of distractions that we buy into in order not to think and in order not to feel. And I think where we've gotten ourselves, particularly in America, is to the pinnacle of that, of choosing not to feel and choosing not to emotionally invest, and instead investing in materialism and reality TV shows and tabloidism in order not to face the devastation that's happening around us and what kind of heart commitment that would require of us. And slowly I do find now that people are waking up, and largely due to the fact that the environment is peeking in the window every moment now and saying, hello, you have to wake up now because the planet can't sustain all of this greed and this distraction. I would love to have the impact that a Dylan has, or a Joni Mitchell, or a Richie Havens, or any of these great, Pete Seeger. I don't kid myself in thinking that that's the way it is anymore, because people don't even feel like they should have to buy or have to pay for art. And to me, art is the one thing that really does catalog who we were in our history. When this generation of people is gone, or when these centuries of people are gone, the only thing that really leaves its mark is the art that we've created. And it's a little disconcerting that at this moment in our history, when things are really chaotic, that what is documenting us is a lot of vacuous music, and people not even feeling like there's any merit to music or art, that they should even have to buy it or pay for it. So it's a very interesting time that we're living through. But in my own way, I feel like the only thing that I can offer up is to write about what is happening in me, and know that the universal spirit is also asking the same questions and experiencing the same chaotic, having the same chaotic experience I am. It sounds dismal and all, but I think that we have such great strength in knowing that we are all in this, and that we are a community, a world community, and that we can't forget that.
My family was my mum and dad were pretty unmusical. My mum was in the choir at the local church choir when she was growing up, but that was about the extent of it. There's no real music in the house either. It was just, I think I learnt most of what I know about music from my friends rather than in the house. My first album may well have been Michael Jackson Thriller, and a belter, if you will, and. It just kind of went from there. Me discovering music for myself or through friends. Mum and dad weren't. His dad was musical.
Was he? Yeah, he played the bass, and there was always a bass line around my house, and drums and various other instruments. He played in bands, singer and all that. My mum piano, and my brother piano. Everyone played it.
On the first day we were there, both went to Dundee. We'd never met each other before, and we just started. It was the second day of Freshers Week. We got together in my room, and just him playing the bass and me playing the guitar, and I'd really love a recording of it to laugh at it, but I wouldn't want anybody else to have a recording of it, because it could have been pretty shocking.
We released our first single under the name Polar Bear with Stowe College. Do you know Electric Honey record label? They're based at Stowe College. They did.
Bounce
and Tiger Milk, and who was it the year after?
Biffy Clyro.
Yeah.
I think Areogram were involved, and Odeon Beat Club. There was, really, really good bands that have been involved in that. It's sort of the project for the year for that course, and we released Polar Bear with Richard Coburn from Belle and Sebastian playing the drums on that record, because we didn't have a drummer at the time, and Richard very kindly stepped in, being the nicest man in rock. Not too long after that release, actually, we had to change the name because somebody else had the name Polar Bear. And it was only by accident that we got the name Snow Patrol, which is a friend of mine getting it wrong, calling us Snow Patrol when we were called Polar Bear, and I just went, what? And then we had to change it, so.
and we had our demo done by February, our first demo. It was rubbish, like 6 songs, total rubbish.
It was really bad.
But
really bad.
yeah, that sort of circulated for a couple of months, and we got signed really quickly after that, like at the end of first year. But it was just as a sort of development deal, you know. They knew we weren't anywhere near. I think he liked Gary's voice and some of the ideas in the songs, you know.
He liked me.
And yeah, that was it for about, what, 3 years, and then it turned into a record deal.
I think it borrows a lot from what we were listening to at the time. We were only really listening to one type of music, really, sort of rock music, mostly American bands. And you know, it's very much informed by that type of rock music. I think over the years and over the albums we've made, we're listening to. We met a lot of people that have influenced us, and especially Tom, who joined the band, plays keyboards, but he used to be a house and hip hop DJ. So over the years we listened to lots and lots of different music, funk and soul and hip hop and house music. So not that we ever go down particularly that path, but it just tends to broaden the sound a little bit. But at the time it was quite insular. We were only listening to Sonic Youth and Nirvana and Dinosaur Jr., things like that. So it is quite a scuzzy, kind of jaggedy sound. I think at the time we were arrogant, and we were much more arrogant and egotistical then than we ever are now these days. I mean, I think we thought we would rule the world. I think every band that releases an album thinks suddenly that they're going to be on top of the pops or something, you know. And that would, you know, over the last sort of 7 years, that was beaten out of us, you know. But at the time, I think we were, you know, we were sure this was going to happen. And it got some good reviews, and the more good reviews it got, the more, you know, we sort of thought, well, this will sell loads. We were disappointed that the records weren't in the shops, I think.
Yeah.
Because I mean, at least people then have the option to go and buy it. But you know, there was people phoning me up from Belfast and from Dublin, friends of ours saying they can't get it, and that was the problem, you know. And it was. I think it took, especially in Ireland, I think it took people a wee while to sort of forgive us for that, because I mean, they're as far as they're concerned, it's our fault. They only know the name Snow Patrol. They don't realise that it's, you know, down to distribution and down to the record company not getting the records in the shops. But they just thought we were ignoring the place, you know, and you know, that would hurt more than anything, you know, the fact that, because we were totally gutted.
It was a period of intense frustration for us. It's the way it is with the small indie labels, you know. It's all about cash flow, and Bell and Sebastian were also on that label and obviously selling a lot more records, and they were taking up all the cash flow. And even though we'd finished our record, we couldn't get it out. We were just literally sitting on our hands, couldn't get any more money out of our deals, you know. We were just sort of frozen for 3 years. And that's when the Reindeers, you know, Gary just one day the springs went in his head, and he went, right, I'm starting another band because it's driving me nuts.
It wasn't ever a case of finishing Snow Patrol. It was just I needed something to do. Frustrated that we weren't sort of that nothing was happening on the Snow Patrol front. So I really wanted to release some albums, and we couldn't do that at Snow Patrol because we were all tied up in Jeepster. So I asked Jeepster if I could start another band. Well, initially I asked a load of people in Glasgow, guys from Mogwai and Arpstrap and Ben Sebastian and Astrid, if they'd like to do like an album together. And I said, what's it called? And I just made up the Reindeer section on the spot. There's no story behind that, unfortunately. And then I went to Jeepster to say if I could do this on my own, and they said aye. I don't think they really cared. And I got in touch with Bright Star. Johnny Davis, an old sort of friend of ours, had started a label, and sent him the tapes. And whether he liked the tapes or not, he certainly liked the idea of having a whole lot of sort of Glasgow indie stars on.
When we started, we were really influenced by the punk bands like, you know, of course, Sex Pistols and the Ramones and the Clash. There were a lot of local bands that we were into also, more local, like the Dead Kennedys. They were from San Francisco, actually. We're from Los Angeles, but we were into TSOL and the Adolescents and those bands that were kind of in our backyard.
Well, I think even the Offspring, when we started out, was just for fun. You know, we hoped to play a few backyard parties, maybe a few club shows, maybe one day make a record so we'd have something to show our grandkids. But, you know, punk bands never, you know, were never commercially viable. They didn't really get a lot of commercial attention. So we didn't expect to have be able to travel the world and, you know, do 7 records that have, you know, gone platinum and stuff. Crazy.
But you were in a serious band called the Clowns of Death.
I was in a very serious band.
Pretty serious.
Clowns of Death.
You know, when we started the band, we actually didn't even play instruments. We just thought it would be cool. You know? We literally did. We went to a show. We were going to go see Social Distortion, I think, in Orange County where we live, and we couldn't get in, and came back and we're just drinking a couple beers in somebody's backyard whose parents were gone, you know, and said, we should start our own band. And so we went out and bought guitars and started playing, and it took many, many years to figure it out. But it was something that we liked right from the start. After about 2 years, we had kind of our original lineup. You know, Noodles had joined, and our first real drummer had joined and stuff, and we put out our own 7-inch that we paid for ourselves. See, 7-inch is this thing they used to have where they you press this thing of plastic and you put a needle on it. But so we actually did. I guess it was sort of serious back then. Like we wanted to make a record and stuff, and it was kind of important to us to.
And we sent them out to, you know, fanzines that covered the punk rock scene all across the country, and you know, we went and pressed up the records and then folded all the covers ourselves and glued them together. Had a gluing party at his house one night. And, you know, and then tried to get clubs to let us play these 2 songs at their clubs.
You know, we'd written those 2 songs. We didn't really have a whole lot of other material, so we're just kind of going through, you know, working out what we sounded like. You know, I think when a band starts, it's a lot harder than it sounds to actually come up with what you call a musical identity or whatever. But we were experimenting with a lot of different sounds and styles and stuff, and eventually it gelled, and we felt good about the group of songs that we had. And so, and the other thing is we were using that 7-inch to try to find a label, and it took like 2.5 years to find someone that was willing to put out a record by. We put out this self-titled record on Nemesis, and they did promote it, you know, a little bit. There was like, I think we sold 3,000 copies, and in fact at that point they wouldn't even print CDs of it. They're just like, we don't think there's enough interest, but we were able to get a record out there somewhat, and we toured and stuff, and we just kind of kept on, you know, trying to meet people and you know, find out a place that would be good for us. And at that time, Epitaph was starting to do well with Bad Religion, and the guy in Bad Religion is the owner of Epitaph, so he was doing that was doing well, and NoFX had just gotten signed, and we thought it would be a good place for us. And it took a little bit of doing, you know. We kind of had to call him a little bit, and we recorded a couple songs with him so he could check us out, and finally he was interested enough to sign us. So when the album came out, and I think people liked it, you know, it got written up in the magazines that it was pretty good and stuff, and Epitaph shipped like 10,000, which seemed like a huge amount to us at the time, so we were really thrilled with that. And then it kind of just stayed there for like almost 1.5 years. It really didn't sell a whole lot more. We were able to do a lot more touring, and people started knowing who we were, but it was kind of like it just was this incubation period where nothing was really happening. I think it trickled up to maybe 15,000 copies or something. And then as people started hearing about us more and this video thing started coming together, it kind of started to just kind of trickle up at the very end there. But that really wasn't until Smash came out. I remember that one time we did our hometown show after Ignition had been out for 1.5 years, and we drew 100 people. We had written some new songs and we wanted to do another record, and while we're in that process of recording Smash, the sales of Ignition are really picking up. It starts selling like 1,000 a week, and by the time we finish the Smash record, Ignition is up to like 50,000. So it's really kind of started to take off in that time that we had taken off to write Smash. So there was a lot more anticipation than we realized coming into it. And so it was kind of that combined with the fact that I come out and got on the radio pretty quickly, actually.
But by the time that all happened, we'd also done, you know, 3 full-length U.S. tours. We'd done a bunch of weekends all over the Southwest. We'd even done a tour of Europe the summer right before Smash came out, and you know, some people started to know who we were. I think we'd just kind of gone out and showed that this is what we love to do, and we're going to go out and work for it.
You know, we still had jobs at that point. You know, we were kind of doing it on the side. I mean, we never thought anything would really happen for the band. It was just a fun thing to do that we enjoyed, so we treated it that way. But at this point, it was like, you got to go on the road now, you know. So we did. We actually quit and started touring full time. But it was a crazy time for sure.
I was an elementary school custodian, and come out and play. Had you know, been on the radio. So we went in and spent $5,000 doing a video for it, which is nothing, you know, for MTV budgets, for video budgets, and they put the video in heavy rotation on MTV, and I'm still working as a custodian. I promised my boss I'd finish out the school year into June, and there'd be high school kids, walking through the school to go catch the bus to their high school, and they're like, "Aren't you?" I'm sweeping up leaves, and they're like, "Aren't you the guy, on MTV? Didn't I see you on MTV?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's me."
As the thing kind of took off, it was a crazy time, and Epitaph was hiring people, and they were trying to grow along with us, and we kind of had to make a decision early as to what we should do, but we wanted to stay with Epitaph because we just felt like that was our home, and we kind of grew up with kind of the whole indie vibe and indie spirit, and we liked that. This was a really cool thing. Up until then, whether it was Beck or Veruca Salt or Nine Inch Nails, once a record on an indie started to go, they were usually off to a major before the first single was over. But we really didn't want to do it that way, and I felt really proud that we kind of made it work. We stayed on Epitaph for that whole record. And then after that, we kind of had to sit down again and talk and figure out where to go from there. And we just couldn't come to an agreement after that. So it just seemed like it made sense for us to go to Sony, to Columbia.
But as far as any kind of fan backlash, I think there was a lot of speculation about what it meant in the media and stuff, but yeah, the people who started to, we had a bunch of new fans from Smash and old fans from Ignition, they came along right with us. Some people were just stoked to know that, we signed a deal and we're going to have a new record out. That's the majority of the fans by far felt that way.
We had most of the material kind of ready for that because the Smash thing kind of went on for like a year and a half. We did a lot of touring, so there was some time to get some material together. And then it took like another 6 or 8 months to sort out the situation with the record label. So as soon as that was signed, we were ready to go. Extend Nombre was a different record for us. It was a lot darker record. And it was the whole, people kept on saying, sophomore slump, because that invariably is what happens after a record does really well, is the next one by almost any artist never does as well. And we thought about how to approach that and what to do, and thought about how we were a band that had been a band for a long time, and we didn't want to be perceived as one-hit wonders because we weren't, and I thought we had a lot of good songs to offer and stuff. And so we didn't want to just try to create Smash Part 2. So we did an album which really was different melodically and different musically, and I think kind of expanded our horizons as to what people could expect from us. And I think that was kind of received a little bit, weird at the time. I think people were like, wow, I'm not sure what to make of this. This isn't the band I thought I knew on the last record. I basically wrote that song based on what I was seeing when I was, driving around my neighborhood, kind of like that. And there was a little bit of what you'd see on TV. There was a whole Jerry Springer phenomenon going on at the time and stuff. And it was just something I thought someone needed to take the piss out of, And I almost couldn't believe that no one had done it yet because it was so obvious, but no one had written a song about it. So we did, and so when we did that, I kind of thought that hopefully it would go over well in Los Angeles, where I live, like in our little world and stuff. But as it seemed to grow and grow, and with MTV, it really clicked in the U.S. And then as it went over, and we're playing shows in Italy, and I remember some girl in Italy saying, "I know someone just like that." It was like, wow, it hit on something that I didn't realize was as universal as it ended up being. At that time, Napster was really huge, and I still feel that the internet's a great place for people to promote their music, and I don't think you necessarily have to have such a paranoid view of it, as you can't let anyone have music on the internet. At that time especially, I think people were using the internet to sample music, and they were usually going out and buying it afterwards. And I think that's changed in the last few years. I think now it's a lot more of the casual listeners that are going out, kind of checking it out and just downloading it. So it is a different world than it was a few years ago. The thing about Napster wasn't so much that we necessarily supported it at the time, like unilaterally, but we knew that our record was going to be on Napster whether we wanted it to or not, because that was just the reality of it, that the labels weren't able to get on top of it and get it shut down. And so we thought, if that's going to happen anyway, why don't we just put it on our own website? At least maybe we can say, leave us your email address and we'll let you know when we're on tour. Maybe at least establish some kind of connection to the people that are interested in your music. So that was kind of our stance on it. And we were really serious about it. And we took it all the way to where we were about to get sued by our own label. And we threatened to sue them right back, for not protecting our stuff. Anyway, we eventually came to a compromise where they said, go ahead and put your first single up, and that's it. And I was happy with that because I can't think of another time where labels allowed a band to put their own first single on their one website for free downloads.
Another part of this is, you know, this was all right after Americana, and Pretty Fly was purported to be the most heavily pirated song of the year, you know, and look what that did for Americana. I mean, it was one of the best-selling records we'd ever had, so it didn't seem to follow suit that, you know, kids downloading is going to hurt your record sales, at least not to us. It seemed like, if anything, that helped.
I think, yeah, if you're writing music, you have to feel inspired about it. And, you know, with us, I know that I don't always feel inspired. There's some days where I get up and I got nothing. You know, it's probably natural. So you just got to kind of do something else, you know, and just kind of try it again in a few hours or the next day or something. So, you know, this time we did spend a little bit longer making sure that the material was really good, because it is our, you know, 7th album now, and I think it's very easy to kind of fall into a rut of doing what you've kind of done before, revisiting some of your old material. So it was just a matter of us making sure we had it right, even if it took a little longer.
To many, the Offspring are synonymous with the LA skateboard punk rock scene, and to some, they invented it. But was there ever really such a scene?
There was kind of always a punk scene, and there was kind of the skate and surf scene, and there was just a certain point in time, and I guess it was around 91 or 92, where a lot of the people doing these skate videos and these surf videos that they were selling in the shops needed some music to put in. And so they started picking bands like us and Pennywise, really Pennywise before us, and the music just seemed to really complement the footage really well. But it was also a way that all these kids that were into these sports started hearing of bands like us and Pennywise and NoFX, and it was really a great way for us to reach some new people and stuff. But I know that as time goes on, people now associate us more and more with that kind of scene and stuff.